A very warm welcome to Addis News Hour. I'm Solomon Danye. Thanks for joining me. The nationwide federal and regional law enforcement body says it is now high time to protect the country's existence from all attacks by encouraging the whole Ethiopian people. A press release it issued today on the nationwide federal and regional law enforcement agencies communication platform indicates Ethiopia has never faced an internal enemy like TPLF in its modern history. In the course of the law enforcement operation, the government has started rebuilding and providing humanitarian aid that cost 100 billion birr to rebuild the people of Tigray that have been affected by the crisis. But now the terrorist group has made the war to have a different face by getting out of the war culture during the law enforcement campaign. It is being carried out by disseminating false narrative and hate propaganda. It has forced men and women aged between 12 to 65 years, disabled people, even priests and sheikhs to Amhara and Afar regions. The main purpose of this destruction campaign is to destroy the country with cruelty, robbery and terror. There is no saving from raping women, killing innocent people, destroying infrastructure, robbing government and individual resources, and shooting paids. Now it is high time to protect the country's existence from all attacks by encouraging the whole Ethiopian people. The statement urged Ethiopians to stand together to take over the mission of this destroyer group. The United Nations is facing new scandal as Tigrayan TPLF rebel leader is seen hiding in a prefabricated container house often used by UN agencies like WFP. Sources also say the Marxist TPLF head Debretsion Gebremichael's recorded speech might have been from a shipping container in Tigray or a temporary housing storage facility utilized by American and other humanitarian organizations. Daniel Kassan tells us more.
As the Ethiopian government increases its strikes at militant and TPLF targets in Tigray, various rebel leaders are increasingly hiding in civilian infrastructures like schools and Western staff shelters, employing a human shield tactic. However, there has been no condemnation from top United Nations officials against this illegal practice by the rebel leadership. A source dictates it is unlikely the United Nations leadership will condemn this EPLF act since New York and Geneva-based higher officials have already fired outspoken regional United Nations officials Maureen Ching and Denia Gaile, who became whistleblowers against improper conduct from its higher ranks. The United Nations whistleblowers, interviewed by Canadian historian and writer Jeff Pierce, accused some Western actors of colluding with TPLF rebels, including inflating data for OCHA publication. Sources in Ethiopia say Debretsion Gebremichael's usage of a United Nations Western temporary housing is likely carried out intentionally and with the authorization of the Tigray-based United Nations staff. There has been an established pattern of misconduct by Tigray-based United Nations representatives and staff. In a leaked audio, the outspoken United Nations officials had criticized that their United Nations representatives assigned to Tigray have gone scoundrel and take direct orders from Tedros Adhanom, the former TPLF leader who became Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO. This latest United Nations controversy comes as United Nations is already under fire for allowing the TPLF to suspend air delivery of humanitarian aid. Last week, United Nations aid spokesperson Stephen Dujarric admitted that the United Nations received instructions to abort landing by the Mekelle Airport Control Tower, which is currently managed by the TPLF rebels. According to sources in Ethiopia, government airstrikes hit TPLF military storage and training facilities. However, TPLF used these events as a justification to stop all aid flights arrivals into Tigray in order to pressure Western government to impose a no-fly zone to protect TPLF military. Famous Tigrayans like journalist Ermela Ragawi have already condemned such rebel tactics that is prioritizing TPLF's military objectives over the interests of every Tigrayan suffering from this war. This devastating TPLF ban on humanitarian aid flights has prevented the Ethiopian government from delivering more aid and medicine directly to the Tigray city of Mekelle. After spending months criticizing the delay of aid passing through the conflict zone of Afar region, which TPLF admitted invading, Western officials like Samantha Power and United Nations officials have refused to condemn TPLF's blanket ban on all humanitarian aid flights from Addis Ababa to Mekelle, which had been the most reliable and consistent method of aid delivery for months. Such aid weaponization and TPLF embargo on aid is likely to increase the suffering and starvation of innocent Tigrayans who are held hostage by TPLF for refusing to be combatants for the rebels.
Scholars laud government's response to enforce law and order after TPLF's attack on the Northern Army base. They blamed international media outlets who erroneously reported the law enforcement operation as a civil war. Gushmal shows more.
It's been a year since the terrorist TPLF attacked Ethiopia's army base in Mekelle and nearby localities. In a televised video, TPLF mouthpiece Kotre Getachew said they conducted lightning attack against the National Defense Force. Even though pro-TPLF groups misrepresented the matter, the government of Ethiopia forced to enforce law and order in northern Ethiopia against TPLF's treacherous attack. Following the law enforcement, the TPLF cliques were hiding themselves in burrows to save their life. Ethiopia has been receiving unprecedented pressure from the US administration and Westerners. The federal government declared unilateral ceasefire, but the hate-monger TPLF waged the war to neighboring Amhara and Afar regions that has been causing catastrophic humanitarian problems. Talking to ETV, Addis Ababa University scholar Zelalem Teferra blamed some international media outlets who intentionally misrepresented the law enforcement operation as civil war.
This treacherous acts against the army was, which was not actually the rule, but exception. So this has brought about a response from the governments. That response was a law enforcement response. There was nowadays, or immediately, there was a misunderstanding of this issue. As if it was it was taken by some international media organizations, as if a civil war has erupted. It was a group that attacked the defense force, and it was against this that ultimate measure has been taken by the government.
TPLF has also been open hybrid warfare on Ethiopia, assisted by some paid lobbyist groups denying the fact, the scholar accounted.
A military attack on the Northern Command, but also it was a hybrid warfare. It was assisted, mediated by information warfare. It was mediated by lobby groups who actually sided the belligerent group and who accused the Ethiopian government as if it is actually inflicting heavy damage on its own people.
TPLF's aggression is far from over and being annihilated in various fronts. Yet Ethiopians are curbing the danger posed by the terrorist group with their unified hands.
ከጨንቻ ወደ ጅማ የሚሄድ ወደ ሀገረ ማርያም የሚሄድ ወደ ሸዋ የሚሄድ ሸዋ ምንለው አዲስ አበባ ነው የሚሄድ ነጋዴ ሁሉ እዚህ መጥቶ ነው እረፍት የሚያደርገው።
Welcome back, you're watching Addis News Hour. Ethiopian renowned filmmaker Tedros Teshome calls for further action in disclosing TPLF's belligerent action to the global community. Tedros says the recent US resolution is complementary to Ethiopia's effort in fighting TPLF's disinformation campaign. Sintayo Tamras tells us more.
The U.S. House of Representatives recently passed Resolution 445 on Ethiopia that for the first time endorses the reality about TPLF atrocities in the national army and civilians in different parts of the country. Talking to ETV English on the matter, Ethiopian popular personality Tedros Teshome says the recent U.S. resolution has some promising elements. According to Tedros, the resolution openly admits that TPLF attacked the Northern Army aiming to launch war last year. The resolution also calls for pulling TPLF forces from Amhara state and ending the recruitment of child soldiers, on top of making divorce with another terrorist group, OLF Shane, the armed faction of the Oromo Liberation Front.
They are good points, but there are not so good points raised on that issue, on that resolution, that they still need to be informed more about what's going on really in Ethiopia. So it's a good sign that we saw those three points raised, but there are still some facts to be understood from their side, that there are still some facts that we need to tell them, because they are still treating the TPLF as an entity than as a rebellion or as a terrorist group. They are a terrorist group, and they need to understand that. They need to grab the fact that these people are a few people who are trying to destabilize the country. On this resolution, yet they are still treating them as a legal entity. So we still need to work hard on that.
The U.S. could change its stance on Ethiopia because of the efforts from nation-loving individuals and Ethiopians in the diaspora, particularly those in the U.S. Tedros also mentioned his role in presenting the facts about TPLF and the present scenario in North Ethiopia to U.S. Congresswoman Karen Bass and the European Union.
The Ethiopians abroad, the Ethiopians in especially California, the Ethiopians in America, who have been, asking for petitions to be signed, who have been demonstrating on the streets of America, who have been trying to reach their congresswoman with different formats, like through virtually going to her offices, and some endeavors from our side, like myself. This, helped the congresswoman understand some facts, historical facts, geographical facts, and TPLF's intention.
Ethiopia has not done enough in presenting the facts to the global community that TPLF started the conflict in North Ethiopia and escalated it into Amhara and Afar states.
We haven't done our assignment in presenting the fact on the ground here. So first we need to do our assignment. We need to present the facts well enough. We need to come up with documentations to tell them that this is what is really going on in Ethiopia.
The TPLF are using their people they positioned in the global system to give a wrong picture of Ethiopia to the global community and states, he said, illustrating this with the leader of World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom.
The TPLF supporters have gone too far with the budget they have, with the supporters they have, with the lobbyists they have, with all the people that they have assigned in different international organizations for the last 30 years. So they have done enough to do the damage before we started challenging them. So those are the people who are hurting Ethiopia, not the countries themselves. Those are the people who are misinforming misinforming the Western world. Those are the ones to be trusted because they have been with them for the last 27 years. So the Ethiopian government needs to send representatives who can change these facts now. So those are the people who are hurting Ethiopia more than the developed world themselves. We still have Dr. Tedros Adhanom representing Ethiopia at the WHO, and you know what he's doing right now.
Since some Western actors in the global politics do not want Africa to wake up and prosper, the Ethiopian media industry must strive so that it can explore and credibly propagate the current phenomenon of Ethiopia to the global population, status, and organizations using the international languages the artist advised.
Moving on. For 2 years, Sudan had looked to be on the path to democracy, leaving behind decades of violent military dictatorship to become a pocket of stability in the turbulent but strategically important Horn of Africa region. But Monday's military coup d'etat has turned that on its head, taking US officials by surprise and sparking fear that a failure of democratic transition there could encourage coups elsewhere and lead to a loss of US influence in the region. Many agree that the coup in Sudan is a reflection of the failure of US policy in that nation. Let's take a look.
For decades now, the political affairs of the Republic of Sudan have been a preoccupation of the U.S. State Department, Pentagon, and the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Prior to the partition of the country in 2011, Sudan was the largest geographic nation-state in Africa. The country of 50 million was becoming an emerging oil-producing state, maintaining ties with both the West and developing countries. However, international pressure from the U.S. under the administrations of Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama sought to balkanize and destabilize the country. Since the overthrow of al-Bashir, the monarchies of Saudi Arabia and the UAE have pledged monetary assistance. The U.S. then pressured Hamdok into accords that are at extreme variance with the priorities and needs of the Sudanese people. Hamdok and al-Burhan knelt to U.S. pressure and revoked without any legitimate authority the Israeli Boycott Act of 1958, which prohibits recognition and trade with Tel Aviv. The people of Sudan have also been forced to pay restitution for crimes ostensibly committed during a previous deposed administration. This reckless disregard of the political and economic sovereignty of Sudan could only serve to weaken its national institutions and foment social chaos among the working class, youth, women's organizations, and professional associations. The coup has been condemned by numerous opposition groupings, including the Sudanese Communist Party, which has called for mass resistance against the push. Biden administration maintains same imperialist policy. The current administration of President Joe Biden has paid limited attention to foreign policy. His orientation has been quite similar to that of his predecessors Obama and Trump. Biden has continued and enhanced the hostility towards China, Iran, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, Cuba, Venezuela, among other states. The potential for an international conflict over the strategic control of geopolitical regions could very well erupt in the coming months. The failure of the Biden administration to intervene constructively in the Horn of Africa is fostering greater discord and instability. With the seizure of power by the Sudanese military, the scenario lays focus on the need for a political revolution in the country, along with several others. Despite the promises of monumental economic and security assistance from Washington and Tel Aviv, the Sudanese people continue to be mired in a cycle of declining wages, rising prices, and political uncertainty. It will be up to the workers, youth, women, professional associations, and genuine political parties to build a coalition of popular forces that can secure a victory over the military apparatus and construct a domestic and foreign policy independent of Washington and Wall Street. The intervention of the military in governmental affairs is once again becoming widespread on the African continent. In Chad, Mali, and Guinea, similar developments have taken place. The African Union must address this crisis in order to prevent a further deterioration of the security situation on the continent.
And in business, Ministry of Revenue says it is working to generate more revenue to the nation. The ministry notes Ethiopia is not properly collecting revenue as compared to other African countries. Habtam Washagri has more.
Economists argue collecting more tax and revenue brings an opportunity to solve various socio-economic problems on top of increasing infrastructural accessibility in a given country. However, some countries are not properly collecting taxes due to several factors related to the economic system and enterprises' accessibility. Talking to ETV, Ministry of Revenue Communication Director Umi Abba Jamal said Ethiopia has such problem in properly collecting taxes and underlined her ministry is working to address the challenges.
አንደኛው የታክስ ስርዓትና ህግን ማስከበር አለብን ብለን ነው ያሰብነው ወደዚህ
Firstly, we have to realize and restore tax system and tax formalities in Ethiopia. Secondly, we have to protect contraband and illegal trade system. I think further activities are also needed to increase the number of trustworthy taxpayers. If we are properly managing these activities, we can improve our collecting performance. Currently, we are collecting lesser amount of tax as compared to some African countries.
ሁኔታ ከአፍሪካ ሀገሮች አንፃር ሲታይ በቂ ነው ማለት አይቻልም።
Umi calls on all taxpayers to loyally pay their taxes and thereby maximize the country's revenue.
ባለፉት 3 ወራት ራሱ ወደ 76 ቢሊዮን ብር ለመሰብሰብ አቀደን ወደ 71 ቢሊዮን ብር ሰብስበናል። ይሄ ሊሆን ይችላል።
Over the past 3 months, we have collected 71 billion birr out of the target 76 billion birr. This shows the optimism of our taxpayers in their country. If our trustworthy taxpayers will increase, I hope we can achieve the target set within the short time possible. I called on all taxpayers to pay their tax fairly to collect over 360 billion birr during this fiscal year.
Paying proper tax is an exemplary of modern society in civilized world, and Ethiopia is aspiring to properly collect its taxes and consequently feeding its development priorities.
This is Addis News Hour. The Sudanese army, in cooperation with police, reopens some bridges and streets in the Sudan capital, Khartoum. Roads have been closed by barriers in the protesters. Before we go, a quick reminder of our top stories. UN agencies working in Tigray are said to be giving cover to senior TPLF rebel leaders. And a renowned Ethiopian filmmaker, Tedros Teshome, calls for further efforts in exposing the heinous acts of TPLF forces. Well, that's it for the news for me, Solomon Danya, and the rest of the English team here in the studio. Thanks for watching.